Indigenous people never vanished. We were written out of history.
People get really upset and say, well, you're not really Indian. Well, yes, they are. They had to lie about who they were. They lost, for lack of a better word, their public identity.
That's right. That's why a lot of your African American friends, if you ask them about their ancestry, they'll tell you that they're Creek or Cherokee or Blackfoot, or they have Indian in their family. That's right, because most so-called African American people are actually American people, Native American people, Aboriginal American people, organic to the land.
We're here, and we're here to stay.
Hey, welcome to Dino Reacts. Come with me on this journey as we go from ignorance to excellence. And the clip I have today is for us to dig deeper into my indigenous heritage. I am the descendants of freedmen and Cherokee Indians, and I am very happy to be introduced to a deeper understanding of myself. So as always, let's get after it. You know, it's always interesting when you getting your history from your drunk uncles. And they were telling me these long stories about how the indigenous black Americans were all descendants of the tribe of Judah, the ancient Israel tribe of Judah, one of the 12 tribes. You know, so when you get that information kind of whimsically, you got to go figure out more about it. So, you want to learn a lesson? Here you go.
Listen carefully. Black people have always been lied to about their ancestry. They are always told they are inferior because their descendants were slaves. We are going to change this false narrative that has been carefully designed to suppress black people. In reality, black people are the chosen people of God. Before Christopher Columbus came to America, Native Americans lived there. They were black. However, people simply do not pay attention to it. It just comes in their blind spots, and they continue to believe that all black people living in America are descendants of the African slaves brought during the transatlantic slave trade. But even...
Once again, I've said this to many of my Native Americans here when I'm explaining it to them, being a freedman and being a Cherokee. For some of us, it had nothing to do with being the descendants of the slaves that escaped the plantations. We were already here as Cherokees, dark and proud and beautiful. But they keep trying to strip that history from me. Like they're the guardians of Turtle Island, which is completely unfair to the people that fought in the wars and died. We didn't win, but we died to try to protect this great nation from white settlers. And to not give us our credit and not giving us the history that is needed for all of us brothers and sisters and sons and daughters to reclaim our native heritage and the lessons and wisdoms and traditions so we can participate in becoming grounded in the land we are. I think that is just rude. I know that recently that the Cherokee Indians did accept the freedmen as a sector, but still, it's not just the freedmen. It's us indigenous Cherokees that they also have to recognize. I know some of these things are happening with the Seminoles, and I'm very proud to see that. But it needs to be openly extended to us all, and they need to let the populace know that we were already here, that we were your warriors. And for me to have my bloodline still alive to this day just shows how the strong strength of the warrior race of the Cherokee Indians, the Cherokee Native Americans. I'm very proud of that. So let us continue.
if it's known that black people are descendants of Native Americans, what does it change? Well, to understand that, we have to know about the 10 lost tribes of Israel, who were among the chosen people of God. Now, it has become more appealing than ever that the native black Americans were actually descendants of these lost tribes. But how? In this video, let's find out.
The Black History Archives.
You might wonder why knowing about ancestry is important. Well, within a few minutes, you will realize why. To understand this, We have to go back into history a bit. Jacob, also known as Israel, was the son of Isaac and the grandson of Abraham. He had 12 sons with 4 women, his 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, and their maidservants, Zilpah and Bilhah. These sons would become the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel. Reuben was Jacob's eldest son, born to Leah. Simeon and Levi followed, both also Leah's sons. Judah, Leah's 4th son, is notable as the ancestor of King David, and, according to Christian tradition, Jesus Christ. Dan was the first son of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, while Naphtali was her 2nd son. Gad and Asher were Zilpah's sons, and Leah's maidservant. Leah bore Jacob 2 more sons, Issachar and Zebulun.
I know, maybe y'all just thought what I just thought, but if the tribe of Judah, if that's where Jesus is descended from, it's crazy that Judah is the one that betrayed Jesus at the end. Wild, right? Whew, how history turns around. Interesting. We're going to dig deeper into that one too.
Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, had 2 sons, Joseph, who received the famous coat of many colors, and Benjamin, who was born as Rachel tragically died in childbirth. Joseph's story is pivotal in the history of Jacob's family. As Jacob's favorite son, Joseph aroused the jealousy of his brothers. They initially plotted to kill him, but instead sold him into slavery to a caravan of Ishmaelites heading to Egypt. Joseph's life in Egypt was a series of trials and triumphs. He was sold to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard, and entrusted with managing Potiphar's household. However, Potiphar's wife falsely accused Joseph of attempting to assault her, leading to his imprisonment. While in prison, Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker, accurately predicting their respective fates. His skill in dream interpretation reached Pharaoh, who was troubled by dreams that no one could explain. Joseph interpreted these dreams as a prophecy of 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. Impressed, Pharaoh appointed Joseph as his vizier, the 2nd most powerful man in Egypt. During the famine, Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy grain. Through a series of tests, Joseph revealed his identity to his brothers and invited his entire family, 70 people in all, to settle in Egypt. They were given the fertile land of Goshen, where they flourished. After Joseph's death, a new pharaoh came to power who did not remember Joseph. Fearing the growing population and strength of the Israelites, he enslaved them. The Egyptians subjected the Israelites to brutal labor, including building cities like Pithom and Ramesses. Their suffering increased when Pharaoh decreed that all newborn Hebrew boys be killed to control their population. Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you by subscribing to our channel and giving the video a like. We want to build a strong community and we need your support. Let's continue now. At this time, Moses was born to Amram and Jochebed, both members of the Levite tribe. To save him from Pharaoh's decree to kill all newborn Hebrew boys, Jochebed placed Moses in a basket and set it afloat on the Nile River. Pharaoh's daughter discovered the baby and, moved by compassion, adopted him. Thus Moses...
If you haven't seen the movie Gods and Pharaohs with Christian Bale, I know some people don't like colorism or appropriation, but it is a really good story. Really, really, really good movie on the story of Moses. I really enjoyed it. So, from Gods and Pharaohs, you should probably go watch that with Christian Bale. Very good movie. It depicts everything: the famine, the blood turning red, everything. Ramses it's a really good watch. Really good CGI.
Grew up in the Egyptian royal household, though he always remained aware of his Hebrew heritage. As an adult, Moses witnessed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. In a fit of anger, he killed the Egyptian. Fearing the consequences, Moses fled to Midian to escape Pharaoh's wrath. In Midian, he married Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, and settled into a life as a shepherd. While tending Jethro's flock, Moses encountered God in the form of a burning bush on Mount Horeb. God revealed his plan to free the Israelites and commanded Moses to return to Egypt to lead his people out of slavery. Initially reluctant and filled with self-doubt, Moses ultimately obeyed God's call. Moses and his brother Aaron confronted Pharaoh, demanding the release of the Israelites. Pharaoh's repeated refusals led to a series of 10 plagues, each showcasing the power of the Hebrew God over the Egyptian deities. These plagues included turning water into blood, infestations of frogs and gnats, swarms of flies, the death of livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, and finally, the death of the firstborn. The final plague was devastating. The Israelites were instructed to mark their doorposts with lamb's blood so that the angel of death would pass over their homes, sparing their firstborn. This event is now commemorated by the Jewish holiday of Passover. After the 10th plague, Pharaoh finally relented, and the Israelites began their exodus from Egypt. They traveled toward the Red Sea, but Pharaoh changed his mind and pursued them with his army. In a miraculous event, God parted the Red Sea, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. When the Egyptian army followed, the waters returned, drowning them. The journey to Canaan was fraught with challenges. Due to their lack of faith and disobedience, the Israelites wandered in the desert for 40 years. During this time, they received the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai and established a covenant with God. Moses led them through various trials, including scarcity of food and water and confrontations with hostile tribes. Despite moments of rebellion and hardship, the Israelites continued under Moses' leadership until they finally reached the border of Canaan, the Promised Land. They conquered the land and divided it into 2 territories. The northern part was given to 10 tribes and was called the Kingdom of Israel, while the southern part was inhabited by 2 tribes and was called the Kingdom of Judah. The northern kingdom of Israel went through a series of unstable dynasties, falling into idolatry and corruption.
As you can see, the first part is pretty much talking about the Old Testament, and it's going to bring us up to date with how the 12 tribes of Israel became the indigenous of the Americas. So let's get into part 2. Man, you don't know how much I love education.
The Assyrian Empire invaded Israel. They captured the capital, Samaria, and exiled the 10 tribes. These tribes were scattered throughout the Assyrian Empire, eventually disappearing from history. This event gave rise to the legend of the Lost Tribes of Israel. Nobody really knew where these 10 tribes went. Now, it's believed that the lost tribes traveled across continents and oceans to the Americas. The discovery of the populated New World challenged Europeans' theories of human origins and raised questions about how the origins of indigenous peoples fit into scriptural history. Various ideas emerged, suggesting relationships to Egyptians, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, Vikings, Tartars, the Chinese, or even the mythical Atlantis. However, the most appealing argument was that the indigenous peoples of the Americas were descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. In the 16th century, Spanish writers discussed this theory. Diego de Landa mentioned it in his The Relation of the Things of the Yucatan around 1566, and Diego Duran wrote about it in History of the Indies of New Spain. The first systematic work on this theory was The Origin of the Indians of the New World by Dominican Gregorio Garcia in 1607. Garcia argued that the lost tribes of Israel traveled to the Americas alongside other migrations, citing similarities in appearance, customs, and language. He even made etymological claims, such as Mex in Mexico being derived from the Hebrew term Messiah.
Okay, one part of the history that I've come to learn, like from talking to my uncles, and that is that about the Benin Empire, about Mansu Sura, who was the father of Mansu Musa. Mansu Musa, was supposedly the richest man in the history of all time. He had so much gold that he flooded Egypt with that he almost crashed the market. But his father was the story of his father. He once made 1,000 ships on the coast where the Benin Empire was reigning on the west coast of Africa, and he sold 1,000. He was the first person to find the rivers in the ocean that could lead to the Americas, and he took 1,000 boats with him over to the Americas to never return. Now, I would like to put together the history that maybe the lost tribes of Israel, since they couldn't reside in Egypt and they weren't, I would say that one of those tribes ended up in Ethiopia. Hence why Ethiopia still heavily practiced Christianity. And I think the other tribes probably joined the pilgrimage of the Mansu Musas or the Mansu Sura to come and go over to the Americas. That's a story that a lot of people don't really talk about in history, but it's something that's well known in my family. That Mansu Sura, Mansu Musa's father, took 1,000 ships and used the rivers in the Atlantic to make it to the Americas, and they never returned. You know what I'm saying? And that's why there are so many melanin descents and temples and a lot of relics in history that look very identical to what is over here in Africa. Not because they were slaves, because they were travelers. And they came over here and became a part of this great nation of Turtle Island. And hence why if you go to any of the deep indigenous parts of America, anywhere, Argentina, Brazil, you always find them to be darker skinned. They look like me. But the history books don't want to give that credence to us, or don't want to study it enough to always try to lighten history. But that's something that I know from my family, and I shall get more knowledge on that so we can continue forward. But let's keep going.
Garcia also suggested that circumcision was common among indigenous peoples, particularly in the Yucatan, and posited that the tribes reached the Americas via the Bering Strait. Contrastingly, French Archbishop Gilbert Génébrard in 1587 argued they traveled via Greenland. In 1687, Diego Andrés Rocha supported this idea, claiming that a broken Hebrew was spoken in Cuba and Jamaica. Rocha believed that the Spanish first populated the Americas shortly after the flood, with the lost tribes arriving much later via the Bering Strait. In the mid-17th century, the theory gained prominence in England and northwestern Europe, especially during the rule of Oliver Cromwell, a period of messianic millenarianism.
No, and that the pretty much well-known history of they saying that the Americas were populated through the Bering Strait really doesn't make enough sense when you look at all the countries that are in Eastern Europe and how fair-skinned they are compared to when you go down to Brazil, where most of the population of Brazil is just as dark as me. They don't advertise that in commercials because lightism is attractism, is vacationism. But if you really were to go to these countries and look around, from El Salvador, all of them, maybe not Ecuador, but most of the other countries, most of the population is of copper tone. So that's why it leads me to believe that Mansu Suri did have something to do with them coming over here. And maybe because of violent storms in the Mediterranean Gulf, there had to be some reason why those ships weren't able to come back. And there's been stories about all these Egyptian relics or African relics or relics that could have come from Northern Africa, the Moors, the Barbary pirates, Egypt, all that stuff, all those things, have been found in the Grand Canyon here. So, but none of those things have ever been discussed because there's been a history that's been completely evaporated, but it's been passed down to my family, and I'm gonna keep passing it forward. But I can definitely say that my skin color did not come through the Bering Strait. That's geographically impossible. We were already here. They came in. We mixed together, and that's why you have the modern Native American. That's of multiple tones. It's just that why our tone is not represented is because when Manifest Destiny came and the settlers came to conquer the Americas, we fought back and died. Some of us lived. We went through the Trail of Tears also, but we're not getting. Hopefully we'll be getting our credit very soon.
Despite no Jews officially living in England at the time, early British Israelism, which suggested a connection between the lost tribes and the English, made the theory popular. It had eschatological implications, as the return of the lost tribes and the conversion of all Jews were believed to herald the second coming of Jesus. In 1775, James Adair's History of the American Indians revisited the theory, drawing on linguistic and cultural comparisons. Unlike earlier authors, Adair had spent 40 years in North America. In 1803, Benjamin Rush, a medical advisor to the Lewis and Clark expedition, asked Lewis to note any similarities between Native American and Jewish practices. The theory remained significant in some millennialist Christian circles into the 19th century, with works like Elias Boudinot's A Star in the West, 1816, and Ethan Smith's View of the Hebrews, 1825, arguing for a central role of the U.S. in a Christian millennial belief system. The Book of Mormon revised the theory, rejecting the lost tribes as an origin, but claiming a biblical origin for Native Americans. It stated that Jewish people emigrated to the Americas after the destruction of the First Temple.
Yeah, and the Mormon Black Book also paints like dark-skinned black people as the enemy. Because yes, if you were the people that were attacking us and we were coming to defend our land, of course you would consider us the enemy. And they wrote in the Black Book to really hate dark-skinned people, if you understand the Mormon Black Book. So this right here, it definitely does make sense, but still, there's a big history of Native Americans siding with these settlers against us, so they can get they made treaties, you know what I'm saying, to get reservations in land as long as they gave up the warrior tribes. And we are those warrior tribes. We're still here, but our cultures and heritages are lost, and we need that knowledge back. And we also need forgiveness.
And that Jesus Christ preached to Native Americans after his resurrection. In 1837, American diplomat Mordecai Manuel Noah supported the idea in The American Indians Being the Descendants of the Lost Tribes of Israel. All this proves that the 10 lost tribes of Israel really came to the Americas and gave rise to black Indians in America. Even though not all black Americans today are descendants of native black American tribes, those who follow the same customs and have been following for generations are the living Israelites, God's chosen people. What do you think about black people's ancestry? Do you believe that black people are descendants of African slaves or the 10 lost tribes of Israel? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on the fact that once black people know they are the chosen people of God, they won't allow themselves to be suppressed and told what to do.
So us Black Indigenous tribes of America can gain our power and understanding that we are part of the group of the chosen people. We came to the Americas to find sovereignty after being persecuted and pushed aside from the parliaments and governments of Egypt and from the Arab nations. We came here to settle on Turtle Island and to find sovereignty and peace, only to once again be persecuted by the settlers and the Protestants. But we are still those powerful people, the sons and daughters of God. And we should regain our place in the Americas, because this is our land, and our place in the world as God's children, and not ever have to feel that you came out of slavery or at any type of low upbringing. We are the sons of the living God, one of the tribes of Judah that became the native indigenous tribes of America, and we should definitely be proud of it. So I'm asking all of my Black Indigenous, Black Native Americans to stand proud in your heritage and go deeper into understanding what makes you who you are. You have a culture. It's not lost. It's been stolen. And a lot of the Native Americans today hold it for you. So go get it back, as I am currently doing, so we can share that to our sons and daughters, so we can be whole, strong, and once again connected to the living God and the living Christ. I'm very happy to go down this journey with everyone. So as always, let's do this. We got this. We have a home, and it's right here. We ain't gotta go nowhere else. We just gotta take it back with love and God. Woo! Once again, thank you guys for watching Dino Reacts. And if you like my content, like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, chef's kiss. Mwah!